Hi, Rosin. Hi, Maimuna. I'm just trying
Hello.
I'm just trying to figure out technical things. Give me a second. Okay, we're ready. Okay, Anna, we're good to go.
Okay, great. Should we wait just a couple of minutes though, see if more people join? I don't know.
I said
Okay.
we're live, so let's get the show rolling.
that's
Let's be
fine.
punctual.
Okay, that's fine. It's recorded, so it's fine. Okay. Oh, more people. So, well, thank you all of you for joining us today. Not that many people yet, but definitely thank you to the wonderful panelists that you're all here to chat with us. So we're really hoping that today's event will spark a lot of conversation on not just gender equity, right, but how this is related to the field of law, which is close to you. So it's a topic that is definitely overlooked, and this is why we want to talk about it. So Lauren, I'm gonna give it over to you so you can introduce a bit Hear My Voice Network and what led us to organize this event.
Yes, hi everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I feel like it's always such an honor to have such amazing people, women from around the world coming together and talking about one of my favorite topics, gender equality, gender equity. And so I've been really looking forward to today. And it's really, I really love this panel. I have old and new friends on the panel and such a wealth of experience. And Hear My Voice, as many of you know or don't know, we run different gender justice programs throughout the year. And we've been working in collaboration with a number of different universities over the past year, and we'll continue to do so this coming year. And so we're working in partnership with our three panelists today and supporting their students as well in their gender justice journeys. So I am really, really excited to hear what they have to say. And I'm going to be hopefully contributing too, but I feel like with the three of you, there'll be enough said. So I just want to say I really appreciate everyone, panelists, host, and all of you joining, for taking the time to participate in this really, I hope what will be a very interesting conversation. So thank you. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Lauren. Yes, super excited. So just a quick note, if anyone has questions for the panelists, you can just use the chat to write them down and we'll just, have them address them later. And we'll also have a short Q&A at the end in case some of you, want to go further into any of the questions. So I think that's it for now. So Lenny, Maria, and Berenice, welcome. I would like for you to, briefly introduce yourselves. What are you doing? What kind of work? And I think especially for this topic, like, why are you here? What are you wanting to talk about, really? Just briefly, but still. Maybe Lenny, could you go first?
Okay. Thank you so much, Anna, for the introduction. It's also Lauren. And every time I hear my voice asking me to be a part of the program, I never say no because I love this program and I still want to support other women. And I may not cannot give you a big thing, but at least I can participate for this very awesome event. And my name is Leni Widimulyani. I currently work as a teacher at the Faculty of Law Pasundan University, Indonesia. Beside teaching, I also give a free legal education and free legal consultation for the poor and marginalized through a street law activity. So these semesters, I also teach clinical legal education. So we provide street law sessions for these poor and marginalized, and we send our students to conduct the street law for this semester. And one of the reasons why I follow the program, that's because I think women should support other women, and being a woman is not easy. So I think we have to survive in order to be accepted. And I also want to learn from other colleagues, from B and also from Maria. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Lenny. That was great. Berenice, could you go next?
All right. Thank you very much to Lauren, to you, Ona, for facilitation, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure, a lot of joy to be here today with you. So, Lauren, you were saying, why am I here? You invited me first. But second, I believe in the fact that, yes, gender equity and not gender equality should be on the agenda. And it is, because it is this year's International Women's Day theme. So I'm glad that you decided to focus the panel on that, because it forced me as well to rethink some of the things I took for granted. Because I think as lawyers, as legal scholars, working in the field of gender and gender legal studies, we tend to focus a lot on gender equality and forget equity. And I am myself, I'm trained as a scholar. I'm trained in critical approaches to international law, so feminist, queer, post-colonial, decolonial, but I'm also a consultant in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So that is the other area where maybe equity is something I'm sometimes handling and trying to find high pathways between critical theory and then how do we make it happen in reality. As part of my teaching position here in Istanbul, Turkey, I work for Bahçeşehir University. It is a private university. I teach women's rights. I teach legal English, but I also, and that's the thing I'm the proudest of, I think, I co-founded with 5 feminist Turkish lawyers a legal clinic, a law clinic, focused on gender. So it's the first law clinic with a focus on gender here in Turkey. It's been in existence for 2 years. So gender is at the core of what I try to do. Although I'm always inspired by people like Lenny that have been doing it for so much longer. So I'm really looking forward to learning from her today and to also learning from Maria, to whom I give the floor, because I'm not even telling Ona to do her job. Like, over to Maria. But thank you again for the invitation, and looking forward to discussing how to embrace gender equity in law.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and an opportunity to be here today and celebrate International Women's Day with you, because it's so important to, first of all, to remind ourselves what we already achieved thanks to generations before us, that we have voting rights, we have reproductive rights, for which unfortunately we still have to fight every day, and we can teach at law schools, which is really amazing, and it's something that would not be possible just 100 years ago. But it's also a day to remember, or to remind ourselves, that there is such a long road ahead of us. So my name is Maria. I'm from Slovakia. I teach at the Comenius University in the capital, in Bratislava. I'm running legal clinics focused on legal aid, such as NGO clinic or street law program. And I'm actually lecturing administrative law, and I'm very, very new to the whole theme of gender equality, and so is Slovak legal environment. And listening to other panelists, I have to say that despite I'm from the European Union country, we don't really have gender legal studies yet at all. So this is the reason why I'm here today, to learn from you and to get inspired for the future. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Maria and Bernice and Lenny. That was great. And as Bernice showed you, you don't really need me here. You can just do the event by yourselves. This is amazing. So we're going to start with the first question that we prepared beforehand. And please feel free to jump in, if you want to comment on what the other person is saying. That's amazing. So like Bernice mentioned, there's a difference between gender equality and gender equity. And it's true that equity is often overlooked in favor of equality. So because this year's theme is embracing equity, we also wanted to have you talk about these differences between equality and equity, and why is equity so challenging? Like, why does it feel like it's more challenging to address? So maybe Bernice, could you start by addressing this first?
Sure. Okay, I should have spoken less because then I'm being called on first. Damn. Okay, thank you. I want to say several things about that. First, I think when we look, because let's bring the focus back to where we are speaking from. So here, the three of us are trained in law. We are legal scholars, maybe even lawyers. I am not one, but at least I'm a legal scholar. So we think about gender from the position of legal brains. And I think when you have been trained in law, and Maria was reflecting about that, you tend to not have learned anything about gender. Gender is not something we talk about in law school, that we taught about. It's not talked and it's not taught. It's even dismissed as something not relevant. I mean, you're going to talk about the right to vote for women, things like that, but the approach that is carried out through gender is not something that you will hear about. Lately, there has been more scholarship focused on gender approaches geared to law, but law remains, law the way we do it throughout the world remains a very formal approach. Therefore, the way we look at gender tends to be based on gender equality rather than gender equity. Equality being that formal notion that every legal subject is the same and is therefore equal to one another in terms of their rights, their obligations, their capacity to interact, etc., etc. But we know that formal legal systems are blind to a lot of social phenomenon, and in particular, the social phenomenon of vulnerability. Legal formalism has a hard time to explain why people that are considered legal subjects at the same level might be experiencing very different capacity to have their rights recognized and protected. And this is where I think gender equity comes in and is a very important notion, because it brings in the notion of fairness. A legal system that is a formal one might be considered just, but it might not be fair. It might not address the inequalities that exist before the law, at the same time of the law, and even after the law has acted. So I think as lawyers and as legal scholars, we have to try to be more aware of this gender equity lens, to try to get out a little bit of this gender equality. So we are fighting for equal rights. Yes, good. But we live in a world where right now, lots of women have equal rights to men in many countries. There are, of course, countries in which there are women that don't have equal rights to men. But let's start from the assumption that here we are talking about a society where you have equal rights. But in reality, women are still facing a lot of discrimination, a lot of abuse, like a life experience that is way different from that of men. So there is something to be said about how the gender equality lens is not able to capture that. And therefore, law is not able to be the tool of emancipation, the tool of redress that it is supposed to be, at least in a very idealistic perspective. And I don't want to talk too much because I want to hear the other ones, but I will finish to say, when I say we lawyers have been trained in usually legal formalism, It's not only us. Legal and political institutions love legal formalism. So I might say we need more gender equity in the way we approach discrimination against women or the experiences of women across their lives. The problem is that the main institutions in charge of doing that, like the United Nations, are focused on gender equality and have made a conscious choice to only talk about gender equality and never use the word equity. And I think it says something about how far institutions and governments are willing to go to really redress the inequalities that are still existing today. What do you think, Maria or Lenny?
I can follow, because I would like to address the issue that, as you said at the beginning, that at law schools we don't really teach about gender. It's the case in Slovakia. There is not a single course focused on gender in law at any law school. Of course, there are classes in anti-discriminatory laws, but it's more about what are the rules and how to apply them. And it's not about why the world is like this and what we can do about it. And also, so it's not topic in classrooms, but it's also not topic in conference rooms as well. Last year, there was a huge international conference in Slovakia with few hundreds attendees. And during the opening plenary, there was 9 men sitting in the plenary. There was only one woman on a stage, and she was just asking them questions and introducing them. And I was surprised that none of my colleagues really questioned that. Only when I talked to a French professor, she was like, oh, this is allowed to have a panel full of men on such a huge event. So this is how the situation is in Slovakia. And it's the same. It's not just in legal academia, but also when we look at the Slovak Bar Association, there is not a committee on women. And there is also not committee on pro bono. And thanks to my research, I believe it's connected, because I conducted the research and I'm still analyzing data, but I believe that women are much more likely to care for social change and social justice and to do pro bono and legal aid. So I believe that we first need to support women and then we can support the system of legal aid. And me personally, I think it will not be surprising for the audience that I had to go to study abroad. I had to go to the US, to California for 6 months to realize that something is missing in my legal environment. But of course, things are moving forward and we can see things are changing for better at my university. For instance, last year we adopted gender equality plan, which should bring positive changes in the future. And we now have new regulations against sexual harassment in academia, which is amazing that we finally acknowledge there is a problem in academia. However, the impulse to adopt gender equality plan, it didn't come from the university management, but it came from the European Union, because the European Commission starting this year provides research funding only to institutions with adopted gender equality plan. Of course, I'm not saying that we do not have support from the university, we do, but I'm worried that not all members of academia or legal academia are ready for it, and that we might accept some resistance also in this area.
Thank you, Maria. Lenny, it's your turn. So unless Bernice also wants to jump in, but I think Lenny.
Okay. Well, gender equality means that the individual rights or responsibilities or opportunities will not be determined by the sex they're assigned as birth, while gender equity is about the equal treatment. And the treatment must be considered equivalent with the rights, benefits, obligation, and opportunities. Yes, you may have the equality in certain way, but for example, both women and men has the equality to practice in the let's say in the legal area, but sometimes the treatment is quite different. When you have to dealing with the male lawyers and female lawyers, suddenly the brain will changing. Some people will trust more the male lawyers instead of the female lawyers. So it's end up with different treatment. So I think people think that yes, we have give the equality between male and female, but in the other way, the equity, they still stuck on it. Like say in academia also, yes, we have the opportunity to be, let's say, the dean, but somehow as a woman, we have the same sources, we have the same way to do that, but then again, I don't know, is it because of the traditional thinking or maybe in socialist structure like that, but it seems like female need more treatment or different treatment just because based on their gender. And I think if something keep going in like that, those opportunity to get the same right or the same treatment will be vanished, because people concentrating on their gender, their sexuality instead of their ability to do so. And for example, in law area in Indonesia, it's so difficult for a woman to be a litigation lawyer, because this is a male area, totally male area. Once you become the lawyer, the litigation female lawyers, suddenly the clients will be like, are you sure that you are female? Are you sure you can help me? Even though let's say in my class, the top of the smartest students are women, but they still not believe that we have the ability to do that. I think that's the reality that we are facing right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Lenny.
Bernice, can I ask you a question? Though?
yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, I think, and you can really share your thoughts, but I think it's really interesting what you said about like this intersectional lens of looking at people in the justice system and thinking that we do take everyone as equal when we're looking, okay, this person is a victim or the criminal of a crime. And we don't take this intersectional lens to think about the multiple forms of discrimination that this person could be facing, or privilege, right? I think with intersectionality, we acknowledge that there's privilege and discrimination. And I think what I've seen in, especially when it comes to more with, NGOs, programming, there's this idea that there's this homogenous idea of this is a woman and this is a man. And we don't really then think beyond that. Whereas, and I just kind of wondered if you thought more, because I really like connect to what you're saying and thinking about how could we, as apart from, I think, educating people more about intersectionality, inclusion, gender, how else do you envision to having more an, intersectional lens in law, in actual like application of law? I don't know if you thought about that or I'm just putting you on the spot, but there was like, I was thinking like, I think it's great, but I'm like, how would it work in practice? And maybe that's the challenge, right? That in practice, it's so hard.
That was a question for me, right?
Yeah, well, it
Yeah.
was in response to back to you, but I think that like anyone can jump in.
Yeah. No, I think, thank you. It's good because you used a word that I don't think I had used, but I wanted to come to. I think intersectionality is one of the keys. I think to me, before practice, training is the first step. We need to make sure, and building upon Lenny and Maria's intervention, we need to make sure that the next generation of legal practitioners are trained in intersectionality or post-colonial feminist, and I'm being very radical here, post-colonial feminist and queer theory, to make sure that they can see through the law. Because the problem with legal formalism, as I was trying to say, is that the law tends to be blind. While there are theories, critical theory-based paradigms that have been created to be less blind to the specific characteristics of someone's situation, one of them being intersectionality, the term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is an Afro-American legal scholar still in exercise, and who created that notion to shed light on the specific situation that Black women are facing in the United States when it comes to their fight against discrimination. They are both discriminated against based on their gender identity as women, and they are discriminated against based on their identity as a Black person. The problem is that the way discrimination norms have been created, historically speaking, is that they tend to focus on one identity dimension. So either you're a woman or you're a Black person, either you're a poor person or you're a rich person, either you're this or you're that, but no one is just this or that. Everyone is a mix of. And I want to remind everyone here, because we tend to think that intersectionality is a very abstract and very theoretical framework. It can be, it has been made to become that, in particular when it was translated back to social sciences. But Kimberly Crenshaw first used it in very specific litigation cases. It was about some specific cases brought by Black women in labor discrimination situation, saying, I think the first case she was looking at was the case of a factory worker, a woman factory worker, saying, I am discriminated here because I'm a Black woman. And no one could see the specific intensity of the burden she was facing because of the intersection of those two dimensions of her identity. So I think perhaps one way to go forward, as you were asking me, Lauren, would be to go back to the origins of Crenshaw's thinking and realize that it was already litigation based. She didn't do that outside in the air, like let's create a very complicated word that then everybody can hashtag, now on Instagram. No, she did it because otherwise those women could not find redress in front of the courts. So it was a very pragmatic tool actually that she created. And I want to follow up, I want to just continue for a little bit on that, because I think for me, equity, what equity brings to the equation that equality does not, is the economic aspect of our experiences in the world that we live in. I think equity is an economic shaped concept. And the problem is that law tend to erase usually economic considerations, because law presupposes a capitalistic order in which every agent is an agent of the capitalistic order, and we're here to make profit, blah, 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 individual property, you know the drill. But that doesn't have to be the case. And that's why I think a lot of the women's rights movement, especially coming from the so-called global South in the 80s and the 90s, have been very critical about the way women's rights regime emerged based on legal formalism and gender equality, saying, yeah, very nice, your idea of equality. But how does it address the root cause of why I am suffering the way I suffer? You can give me the right to vote, but if I cannot eat, if I cannot have an income, if I cannot own land, for example, or transmit it to the right to vote, I don't care. Like literally, it doesn't change anything, And so on that, I would just want to direct everybody's attention. So I was trying to look at the Beijing Platform for Action, the 1995, the original foundational text in women's rights. And of course, there are only two very brief mention of equity. Everything is about equality, which makes sense. But I would want to invite you to look at a counter declaration, which was adopted at the same time, Beijing 1995, but from the NGO Forum by indigenous women. And they adopted their own Beijing Declaration of Indigenous Women, where they deconstruct the whole Beijing Declaration as it would be adopted, and the whole economic order that is behind. And I think this declaration could be a way forward in looking at gender equity rather than gender equality, in my very modest opinion. And I will stop here because I'm talking too much, but thank you for that great question.
Thank you so much, Berenice. And thank you, Lauren, for raising the question about intersectionality, because it's something that definitely needs to be talked about. And I'm glad it came out now. If not, it was going to come out later for sure. So Lenny and Maria, would you also like to comment on what Berenice was talking about? It can be on intersectionality or any other thing that, you know, caught your attention that you really want to talk about more.
Of course, I would like to add that, like when Berenice was talking, I just came up with so many examples from Slovakia, such as forced sterilization of women from Roma community, which was happening relatively recently, just 10 years ago. And then I have a interesting example when we are trying to explain the difference between equality and equity, and it's our justice system. Because in Slovakia, we have over 60% of women, female judges. And some people are talking about over-feminized judiciary, and they even call it a problem, which is already gender biased because no one is talking about over-masculinized army or police. Anyway, I looked into data and I found out that it's true that we have over 60% female judges, but it's there is a horizontal and vertical segregation, so there is totally no equity. It just seems as there is equality because most female judges are on the lowest courts and usually not in the position of power. They are not chairing those courts. It's men. So, and those men are deciding the future of the courts and the administration of courts. Another issue is that the high number is not a result of excellent policies adopted, or it's not really intentional. We don't have know-how that we could share with other countries with much lower representation of women in justice system. And currently in my research, I'm looking into the reasons why we have such a high representation of female judges. And the numbers, around 60%, are similar in other countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. So what we have in common is that we are all post-socialism countries. So what happened during socialism was that government was so hard trying to raise productivity of the nation that they unintentionally separate women in professions. So what happened here that during the second wave of feminism, it was all done by the government here. So women started working on different professions, which meant that they were doing double shifts because they were for 8 hours in a factory or in law firm and then working home, taking care of their families. And there was actually no pressure from women at all. So this might be a reason why we don't have legal gender studies, because we just accept that there is equality, or at least it seems like there is equality. And there are, of course, other reasons why we have such a high number of judges. It's also because the position of judges in civil law countries is not as prestigious and as good paid as it is in common law countries, which basically means that men let women to become judges because there's no so much power. So they just went to law office or law firms and not to judiciary. Also, the selection process is like very academic, which requires months of memorizing, which is easier for women. And the environment is much more family friendly. So what I'm trying to say is that it might seem that that we are excellent in supporting women in judiciary, but it's actually the reasons are completely different, and it's completely unintentional.
Thank you, Maria. And it totally makes sense what you said. And I think it happens in many countries, like you mentioned as well. It's not just Slovakia, that sometimes things happen. And then, like you said, you can't reproduce it. So then how useful is that? Lenny, would you also like to share your experience from Indonesia?
Yes, thank you so much. I second the Bernie's opinion about gender equity. Actually, it works to correct historical wrong who have left behind. And it's interesting when you said that, yes, women have the right to vote, but what about other rights? It seems like by giving one rights, it's like completely give the whole things, which is not. And gender equity is to make sure the fairness, the strategies and the measure must be what is it available to compensate women. And I think people might concentrating on the equality, but what's the inside the equality, it does really matter. Like people give you job, but people will concentrating on you as a woman when you do your job, you know. While for other gender it doesn't really matter. And for example, for the sexual harassment case in Indonesia, we have the case, and the ones who become the victim was a female student. She was harassed by her teacher in Sumatra, and then she exposed the case nationally. And yeah, some of these women activists say something and then give a lot of support, but at the end of the day, she's the one who feels so embarrassed. So the victim blaming is still there, even though that she gets this kind of help, but socio-cultural still happening like that. And I don't know in your country, but in Indonesia, we have still practicing the toxic masculinity, the patriarchy. And then if you are a woman, you cannot have a strong opinion about something. While when you keep passive, people will treat you something. And then while you are, I have this really, really bad experience. One of the senior said something to me like, why Lenny still talk about the women's right? It's wasting time. And then because doing this, it cannot make me feel rich. And I just can't believe that he used to be the one that I look for. And now he says something about that just because that I'm a woman and I support other women. And what at the same time, he also thought the legal rights, and how can it be so absurd. And in Indonesia, I think no matter how globally you are, the traditional values and the socio-cultural is very, very strong. It roots in every aspect in life. And one of the things that to make you survive if you adapt the situations, but what piece by piece and then step by step you can react, but you cannot give those kind of reactions like you give maybe in the western side of the world. It just cannot. We still have to keep our mouth shut in certain way, otherwise it will jeopardize your life. It's still happening right now. Yeah, even though we still have give the same opportunity for male and female working in certain field, but then again, when you work in that field, so people will concentrating on your gender instead of your quality. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. And I feel like you actually made me think of, the word that came to my mind was the word illusion, thinking about that, as you were saying, Bernice, it's like, here's the vote, like now we have equality. It's like this illusion or this distraction almost, right? That we've given you this, now everything's fine. But then I'm thinking about, okay, but who am I voting for? I'm still not getting the opportunity probably to vote for someone that's going to think about these intersectional gender issues, because potentially the candidates are still all men. And so I think that there's this kind of and I was thinking about International Women's Day, which brings us here today. And I know that last year there was a big controversy about businesses and companies posting, oh, happy International Women's Day as a kind of marketing tool. And it was great to see the, I guess, the pushback on that and saying, hey, this is not something that you get to use as your hashtag to sell your product. You know, like, we don't need makeup, we need rights. You know, we don't need discount on this. We need you to pay the women in your organization or your company the equal salary so they can afford to buy the food that they need for their families. You know, like, so I think that, to me, I think about that word a lot, illusion and distraction, about that, how it's kind of that you're saying, Lenny, like, why are you still talking about this? Everything's fine. You know, there's 50-50. But like you were saying, Maria, that there's, just because there's women maybe are representing that 50%, it doesn't necessarily mean there's any kind of equality or equity, right? So I think that's really kind of important to consider. And there was somebody in the chat that asked, which I think is a great question, what can cisgendered women do to better open up spaces in law for other genders and identities? So if anyone would like to tackle that one, I'll hand you over. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first thing, I'm not a cisgender woman, although I pass for one, and I'm happy for people to refer to me as one. But I think we need to always, there is one thing, and it's a tiny thing, but I think it's a very important thing. We need to always make sure that when we talk about International Women's Day, or we talk about women's rights, we make it clear from the beginning that we don't want to exclude anyone. That a woman, I mean, is an all-encompassing notion, that anyone that feels, that identifies as a woman is allowed to be part of the club. So I think we need to be very careful, because in the past few years, there's been a bit of a backlash, like some new reactions wanting to exclude, for example, trans women from the women's rights movement, and that is, to me, unacceptable. Womanhood is a social experience first and foremost. It can be also a biological one if you want to focus on the biology, but it's a socio-economic experience. And there, I think, as a cisgender woman, you have to be always careful that what you think is a universal woman experience, which is yours, is not at all. Is not at all, especially when your womanhood is not only defined by your womanhood. Your womanhood is always already defined by your race, your class, your religion, your ethnicity. There are many other aspects that predefine your experience of womanhood. So I think it's not only, we're not only talking about cisgender women. I would say here, speaking from where I speak, as a white looking, cisgender looking woman, how do I make sure I don't exclude other women from the conversation, especially because their points of view, their inputs might be way more critical than mine in making sure that we are going forward, we are, imagining equitable solutions. And here I'm borrowing from Bell Hooks, this amazing thinker, Afro-American thinker. She always said, it's only if we start thinking from the margins that we can really rethink the center. So let's always try to think, okay, there is my experience, great, but when I have a lot of privilege, my experience is maybe not the place where to start to change the system, because my experience would be more in favor of a status quo than really disrupting the main structures. So yeah, that would be my answer. So let's try to not exclude. Let's try to always question, what do I mean in that sentence, or in the title of my event, or in the group I'm trying to form with my colleagues when I'm saying it is a woman thing? What am I trying to say, and who am I perhaps excluding, even without warning? No one is perfect, but we can learn to be better one day at a time.
I think that's, yeah, I like the way you ended that, Bernice. Thank you for sharing, is that this is still a space, I think, to navigate, right? I think that no one is like, you know, people sometimes like, tell me they want an exact definition, right? They want you to give the exact answer. And I think that this is, you know, I think that's the kind of what makes me happy that we're all here today, to learn and explore together and think of different ways or better ways to be more inclusive in all the different spaces that we are. And I feel that it's important to like bring in the like idea of unlearning, right? We've all been in patriarchal societies where we've learned behavior that was given to us, And so we're also on that journey of unlearning that. And what does it mean? You know, I know that there's still times when things come to my head and I'm like, why did I just think that about that person? But it's kind of the biases that we're given from our societies. And I think that this today is us together and learning those and thinking about how we could do things differently. So thank you so much for sharing. Lenny, Maria, would you like to respond to this question, or I can hand it back over to Lenny, go ahead.
Oh yes, I agree that I think it will be better for us not put ourselves into boxes. We can absorb all this experience, and then since that we are adult, and then we can have our own options. We can have our own needs. And for example, there's a terms in my country that, oh, I feel a complete woman when I can deliver my own baby, when I have a child. I said, like, the day when you were born as a woman, you are a complete woman. Yeah, whether you have kids or no kids, to have the sense of motherhood is like something that you can have, whether you get married or not married, having kids or not having kids. So the society push us to put ourselves into boxes, and it's not fair. um and then it seems like we are a woman, we cannot show our masculinity, we cannot show our independence, because it will consider violate your the day when you are born, because you're a woman, because woman's supposed to be this and this. Let's break the change. And then as long as you happy what you're doing, and then as long as you uphold the rights, and also you still on the right track, just go for it. And then we I, each country have different perspective, different approach, and then I still believe that let's not put us into boxes that make us difficult to move. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything what was said. I have to say that I'm ashamed of my country when it comes to protection of LGBTIQ plus people. Maybe you heard several months ago, only 19 years old man shot two people in front a queer bar in Slovakia. Reaction of our members of parliament and government was just horrible, except for our president. She's an excellent woman and lawyer. Otherwise, there was no reaction at all. And we are still one of very, very few countries in the European Union. We still don't recognize registered partnerships. We have no legal protection for LGBTIQ plus minority. In our constitution, it's even written that marriage is only between a man and woman, and it was only added there several years ago. So this is a whole topic in my country, and I have to say that I feel really ashamed how the situation is now. And there is so many very talented, smart, good people who are leaving Slovakia to live in love and peace in a country that is actual cultural and open-minded. So this is what I feel that I need to say.
Thank you. Yes, Bernice, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up on that. Thank you, Maria, for sharing the awful situation in Slovakia. I think that's why when we talk about gender equality or gender equity, we talk about gender, and it's so important because it's not only about women, it's about other identities, and it's about more broadly how gender as a social phenomenon affects everyone, men included. How men themselves, be they cisgendered men or be they non-cisgendered men or whatever their sexual orientation, they're also impacted by how the workings of gender. They are not free to be who they are, really, right? So I think gender equity, I mean, today we've taken more like a women's rights angle, but I think what we are saying here applies to any type of vulnerable populations across the board, and including certain men, for example, trans men, or intersex men, you name it. So yeah, I just wanted to follow up because you were mentioning the situation of the murder, the violent assaults that happen. So, yeah.
We do still have the same problem like Maria in Indonesia, whether that you are trans man or trans women, legally unaccepted, and then socially also unaccepted. And even though that you have like this surgery, you still needs to do the new identity and go to the court and everything. And a part of it also, this bias also not only talk about to women and other genders, also to male, the toxic masculinity, for example, that as a man you cannot show your tears, you cannot show your emotions, boys don't cry, and you cannot put, you know, for the skincare and everything, those things, probably the small thing, but it brings a lot of causes in the society, because it will make a submissive relationship between male and female, because I'm the male, I cannot show my emotions, you are the female, you are the crier one. Yeah, those constructions, like one by one, piece by piece, that I want to try to break the cycle, at least in my class. And I kept telling my male students that it's okay for you to cry, it's okay for you to show your emotions, and it's also okay for you to helping the domestic issue, by helping your mom laundry or cooking something. It doesn't necessarily that you losing your masculinity just because that you're helping your female sibling or something like that. And uh since also I'm dealing with another clients with domestic violence, I think I found one of the cause why male tend to be the doer, that because male as or being asked like you have to be strong, and then you are the provider and everything, without giving them any chance to talk about their feelings deeply. Yeah.
Well, thank you, all of you. This was so exciting and very enlightening. And I really cannot add anything else to this, because I feel like everything you've said is already so wonderful. And I also feel really awful being mindful of time, but I see that, we kind of need to wrap up. So I would love for you to talk about this, endlessly. Like, I would be fine with it. I'm sure other people will be fine with it as well. But I just wanted to go a bit back to, like the law focus. And so we have one last question that I think we haven't addressed that much. So we just wanted to ask you, what are some of the current things that maybe you're doing to improve gender equity in the law, or things that you think should be done in the future that you might be, interested in? Whoever wants to go first.
I can start because I think that, yeah, we are in there is a long road ahead of us at my law school. In September, my law school celebrated 100 years. And as a part of celebration, I host and have a short presentation about the position of women in legal professions. And then we had a panel discussion with few excellent women from different legal fields. And it was probably the very first event about gender in law in our 100 years history. And we opened many topics, including sexual harassment in academia, and also how important it is to take care of your mental health as a lawyer. So this is something I'm focusing on right now. I'm conducting a research because of course, gender segregated data are not available in Slovakia. So what I'm looking into is, or I'm trying to create gender segregated data and looking into vertical and horizontal gender segregation in academia and judiciary and law firms. And in future, I hope when I get enough knowledge, my plan is to open or design and teach gender legal studies in the future. And one last thing, when we were talking about how to support minorities, I'm focusing in my research also on whether women and men judges are judging differently. And according to some research done, women are more likely to judge in favor of minorities when it comes to gay rights or granting asylum rights, which is explained by the fact that despite women are not minority when it comes to numbers, but we are still minority when it comes to power. And because of our experience, we are more sensible to other minorities as well. So maybe to support minorities, we again first need to support women in high positions.
Thanks, Maria. That's super interesting research. I would love to, read more about that when you do it. Berenice, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to hear about your projects, Maria. It's very exciting, and I'm glad. The law faculty of your university is lucky to have you, because you are embodying change. And I think before we started the panel, we had a bit of a conversation, the three of us, and Lenny was talking about some change that might happen as well in her own faculty. And I think something we can do as members of our respective law faculties is to try small things. It doesn't have to be big. Already some research, then starting, I don't know, organizing a panel, maybe starting a law clinic, a small one, as I was saying, so before the panel started, institutionalizing, contributing to institutionalizing the notion and the work around gender in spaces where it's usually not talked about. To me, it's part of doing not gender equality work. For me, it's part of doing gender equity work, because it is making it real. It is not just law in the books anymore. It is law in action in that sense. From where I speak, so that's what I've been trying to do with the gender law clinic I created here in Turkey, in collaboration with lawyers from the ground. So I don't know what's happening on the ground, but they do. So they should be the ones co-designing it with me. So that's something I think could be part of going in the right direction. Another thing would be also to never forget that what we are trying to achieve is maybe something we've already tried to achieve in the past. I think we need to still learn lessons from the past. And I just want to remind everyone that International Women's Day was started by working women that demonstrated at the beginning of the 20th century for better working conditions and better pay. So the idea of equity, the idea of the economic dimension of the struggle of women was already present 120 years ago, 110 years ago. Maybe we forgot it in the meantime because we focused too much on the letter of the law, but this equity thing I think was there. And then maybe it's about finding the right way to add it, to have it now without falling into the trap of pink washing and all the washing that we've been seeing happening from corporations. And last but not least, I just wanted to mention, because I'm speaking from Turkey, where we've been going through a tragedy now for a month. And I just want to say that even actions such as disaster relief activities can be more gender equitable if we pay attention to what is needed on the ground. So since the beginning, since the earthquake hit the eastern part of the country and the northern western part of Syria, there have been women's organizations, feminist organizations that have been providing relief in the zones, targeting women and LGBTQIA people, trying to address their specific needs, because the usual mainstream disaster relief activities tend to be gender neutral, but actually perhaps very male. We don't think about in the parcels or in the items we send, we don't think about menstruation products, for example, or any kind of products that would be specifically targeting women and children. So everywhere in any kind of activity, there is something to be said about how gender can make us more aware, even in the most, in the most dire situation. And I will conclude now with the last thing. We are in a time where we are seeing the emergence of corporate social responsibility, where companies are really loving the thing about sustainability, gender, etc. So some people in the corporate world are saying we are in the post-feminist era. Are we though? I don't think we are. And gender equity, for me, if it's done right, should be feminist, feminist driven, and we can't get rid of that. And especially intersectional feminist, post-colonial feminist driven. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Berenice. You've raised super important questions, and thank you for reminding us as well about all the issues, you know, the economic dimensions and the problems with the aid industry. But yeah, we could go on that forever. So Lenny, could you please also share what are you currently involved in, or what would you like to be seen in the future?
I cannot give something big, but at least I can do something based on my ability as a teacher and also as a woman activist, at least in my area. At least in my classroom, I'm trying to change the male students, the way they think about this gender issue. And at least I can open their mind about when you speak about fairness, it should be fairness in every gender. And even though that you may found that your friend become gay or LGBT or something like that, you may not agree with them, but please always be there for them when they need help. You don't have to agree in everything, but as a human being, you have to be there. And then also, I'm joining with the National Agency for Witness and Victim Community Base. So we have 7 region in Indonesia. I'm from West Java regions, and this national agency actually giving help for witness and victims to find their own way, for example, the legal aid or psychological need and everything. And I'm still helping and concentrating on the victims of domestic violence because the number is not decreasing, it's increasing. And at least that's something that I can do. It's not a big thing, but hopefully I can change someone's life. I may not not be able to change this national issue, but at least for this victim, I can help their life. Yeah, I think, and also speaking about pads and menstruation product, I always keep promoting on my social media, pads should be free. It's supposed to be a lot of vending machines so people can access to get the menstruation pads. Yeah, not okay. For example, people give you free condoms. I mean, sexual activity is an option, but menstruality, it's not. It's you deal with that every month, and it's supposed to be free. Yeah, I think that will be all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. That was great. I've heard some men though say that it is optional. You don't have to have it. But anyway, yes. Before we move on to Lauren, because I know she also wants to share her hopes. I'm not a lawyer, but if I could think of anything that I would wish would improve would also be, and you've talked about this, of course, just thinking about access, like equitable access to justice and legal aid, because I know that is an issue. I haven't, been involved in it, but I know it is. So up to you, Lauren. Would you like to share as well?
Yeah, thank you. I think I've just kind of inspired by everything shared. And like you said, Anna, I feel like we could stay here all night. I'm like, oh, we could just, but I wanted to also kind of just think about, like, we're talking here today and it's International Women's Day, and, everyone's hyped up and they're all kind of like, yeah. And I think that for me, it's about every day is, like for me, I think every day is International Women's Day. And it's like taking those steps that, like you said, Lenny, whether it's your friend, whether it's somebody in the community. And I think my message about hope is always that we are the change that we want to be, right? Like, and it sounds really cliche, but like, we've all come, when we're all here as volunteers, we're all using our own free time to come and share and about something that we are passionate about, and passionate about making that change. And I always encourage all of the people who are listening in to know that you can do that too, right? Like we set up Hear My Voice as a completely voluntary organization 3 years ago, and we're still here today, bringing amazing people from across the globe who are, carrying on this like fight for gender equity. And so it always makes me inspired when we have such events, and always kind of want to, you know, help other people to know that they can create even small change. Like you said, Lenny, like you say it's not a big thing, but you could actually save someone's life. You know, the work that you're doing is potentially saving people's lives or getting them out of very dangerous situations and helping them rebuild their lives. So I think that we should never diminish the work that we're doing, because I think every step that we take is a challenge for ourselves on a personal level. And, you know, as we're saying, we're going against systems that were built for us not to take those steps, right? And every day we're trying to go in a direction that a lot of things are pushing us back. So I think that we should always pray. I always think, like, you know, take the small wins, because I think, unfortunately, like we've talked about, there's so many things that need to change, that the big wins are the hard ones, right? But the small wins, we can do those day by day, and that's where we're going to get that big change. But we also have to be patient. So that's kind of my message of encouragement, I think, for hope. And as I said, Hear My Voice is really trying to work with all of you, like in this way of promoting gender education, because we acknowledge that not in every school there is this opportunity to have gender programs and gender studies. And so that's kind of what spurred us on to think, this is an area that I feel very passionate about. I was a law student, I studied law, and I felt like, where is the gender in this? So I think if anyone's listening today who's interested in working with us too, who is part of a law school, please do reach out as well. That's it. I'll pass it over to you, Anna. But again, big thank you to everyone. I have a lot to think about after this call.
Reassessing lives. Well, we're over time, but I feel like we can stay here longer. So I am gonna open, you know, the floor to participants, and I know some of you already asked questions in the chat, but this is your chance. If you have any other questions for Maria, Berenice, or Lenny, please do so now. You can write it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand. And if not, in the meantime, I'm gonna thank you all again, panelists, Lauren, and participants. This was great. And like you said, it does sometimes feel cliche, right? Like, we're doing this today because it's International Women's Day. Like, we cannot do this tomorrow or something. Like, we obviously can, but this is a reminder. And I really liked what Maria said about, you know, I could not be teaching law 100 years ago. And it made me think, like, how many things could we not be doing 100 years ago? And it's not just like teaching law, like voting, like anything. We would not be here today 100 years ago talking about these things. It would probably not be allowed. So yeah, that's my take on this. And it was so great to just hear you talk about the law, which is, you know, a very interesting topic. So I feel like no more questions then, I think, from participants. Thank you, Sanjukta, for the comment. Exactly. So anyway, so yeah, so we're gonna